Give them a bottle of vodka because guys love drunk girls. You have to fuck the girls first because girls really are that stupid. She'll do some virtue shit like, ooh, I don't want to do that, it's disgusting, so you have to fuck them first. Quote, Andrew Tate. Quote, sell them a dream. Tell us you'll get more money training the other girls. We can buy a house. Sell them a dream. So the recruitment process is, I don't mention webcam until after I've had sex with them. Andrew Tate. You have to fuck the girls because if you don't, she's fucking somebody else and he's the one controlling her mind. You have to fuck them and you have to love them. Otherwise, women have no loyalty. Women are snakes. Quote, Andrew Tate. Girls are lazy and girls are stupid and girls don't understand how taxes work, unquote. Andrew Tate. Welcome back, everyone that tunes in. This podcast is not actually going to be much to do with Andrew Tate at all. I'm going to be looking at the data that went into creating Andrew Tate. And it might come as news to him also. We're going to go back to the start. Some of you who are aware of him might recall that his father was a chess champion in the United States, Emery Tate, and he was also part of the United States Air Force. And Andrew was born at the military hospital there at Fort Meade in Maryland. And interestingly, their motto is we provide warrior care. Yes, warrior care. We provide warrior care. You can see it for yourself on Wikipedia. That is interesting enough. That Fort Meade data and Andrew's birth certificate is still very prominent in his data feed. As you know, he's gone on to talk about, what it is to be the warrior and all this sort of stuff. So, as I said, I'm not going to talk about him too much. For those of you that are familiar with him, you may already be familiar with his side projects and a lot of the things that he's got his head into over the very short period of time that he has managed to make a tiny little blip on the global landscape of cultural relevance. So there we have an instance where a man has shot to prominence within a very limited scope. He's not really that famous. He just has a cult-like culture following on social channels, which seem to promote the idea that whatever's happening on social media is really the center of everything. And yet there are how many of them, billions of people in this world who don't know who Andrew Tate is, don't really care, either think he's an idiot or are dumb enough to join the cult. It lends to a discussion about masculinity, and this is where the military comes into it. I'm not going to indulge Andrew's beliefs about masculinity. They're very two-dimensional. Obviously, we live in a modern era where we don't have to hunt for food anymore, neither do the men. Some of them still choose to and others don't. I happen to live in the country, so there's a wide variety of different types of men here in terms of their physique. A lot of them work the land and they're extremely built, while others are in different professions and trades and they're not as built. And then we have others who are meek and mild-mannered and they're quite happy as well. So that being the case, the masculinity concept is very much a part of the underlying code of this simulation that we're in and the matrix that exists within it. The Matrix is something also that Andrew has latched onto without really understanding what it is. But at least he's halfway there to possibly waking up to how heavily he has actually been controlled by all the back-end data, which links back to the United States Department of Defense and the Army. It's very evident in his manner of speaking. He does tend to speak. His personality is very much that of, I don't know, some type of weird kind of AI or a robot or a boot camp general that inspires everybody to get out of bed in the morning and puts them off to training at boot camp. This military masculinity is the aspect of toxic masculinity that most men and women agree is no longer part of our evolutionary path. Modern society, a socially modern society that has embraced human rights and equality, no longer has to erroneously rely on a toxic masculinity in order to function. And most people recognize that the type of masculinity that Andrew is promoting is outdated. It doesn't apply sensibly to everybody, is very two-dimensional, and doesn't really do anything to help who he perceives to be weak men. They call them incels. When what we're really dealing with is an instructor that's sitting on one side of a computer screen and strangers sitting on the other side, and those strangers are being presented with information about what it is to be a man, but they're not getting it from their father. They're not getting it from their peers in real life. They're not getting it from perhaps role models in school or through their sporting hobbies, or they're getting it from somebody online that they don't know, who unfortunately does have an incredibly questionable past and an incredibly criminal past. So what we're really looking at is how the masculinity, the toxic masculinity that's promoted through a militarized mindset is very brutal, yeah? It's very neutral. It's very objective. It can be cruel. It can also be extremely logical, lightning fast, difficult to argue with. It does represent an element of reason, but reason without understanding and reason without mature compromise in moments is foolish. The military masculinity is the toxic masculinity because we are not on that battlefield in our everyday lives. Anybody who thinks that we are, I'm very sorry, is delusional. Moments of what we consider to be battle in our everyday lives come on a completely different wavelength to what is required in battle. I mean, that's just a reality. We are not at war. We are not brandishing weapons. In America, obviously, you guys have guns, but the overall understanding is that there's no actual war going on. We don't have to be patrolling the streets and being big soldiers, warriors, going out there to defend anything. So it's an erroneous and ill-placed appropriation to a military and warrior type of masculinity that no longer actually has a place in our societies. And for the odd occasion where somebody might get their house broken into or might get mugged in the street, and a man is required to step up and handle that business, well, he's either going to be able to or he's not. It doesn't matter how built you get. It doesn't matter how big of a man you get. Maybe the guy who mugs you is even bigger. They're really they're moot points. Andrew's perspective of masculinity doesn't actually apply to the reality of the complexity of real-world scenarios, which are completely different and unique for everyone every single time they happen. Is it important for a man to be able to protect a woman? Well, here's the thing. He automatically can. Unless he's with a woman that is bigger than him and physically stronger than him, a man 9 times out of 10 can already automatically protect a woman within his capability. Whether or not he can protect her from somebody who is bigger than him is another matter. That's reality. It also happens in battle. It also happens in war. When boys are born, they come with their own set of genes. They're already predetermined how tall they're going to be, how set they're going to be, what their propensity is to grow muscle. And then there is the complexity of their persona and who they are as a person, their childhood experiences, what shapes them as a human being, their education, all of these sorts of things, and what sort of profession they do and how physical they can be in their lives, that determine who this person turns out to be as a grown man. And Andrew Tate's very two-dimensional and oversimplistic approach is causing controversy because it has a military toxic masculinity aspect to it that has nothing to do with real-world reality. It does actually just exist as a construct that a small percentage of men might find helpful. That's it. That's about it. A small percentage of men who want to get into earning big money, driving fast cars, screwing lots of women, and dressing smart, and smoking cigars and vodka, and talking loud on podcasts. That's a very, very, very small percentage of the overall population of functioning, healthy men in the world who are either single or partnered or married with children. There's only so much that human beings can actually do to maximize their full potential in life because of the choices that they make. Andrew's idea to just chase the money so that we can afford freedom is obviously there for anybody to try. But in terms of masculinity and how it links back to war, the United States Department of Defense, and more locally for Andrew, the Walter Reed, I think, hospital at Fort Meade in Maryland, where he was born, is quite obvious. It's extremely obvious. We provide warrior care. That is their motto. I don't know if it still functions as a military hospital, but nonetheless it did when he was born, and that is where he was born because his father worked for the United States Air Force, and he was their chess champion. So there you go. Apparently his parents divorced and the mother moved back to the UK. I assume she took Andrew with him. I can't really comment on any of that, but I have actually listened to some of his other interviews, one of them in which he talks about a girlfriend that he had for 6 years, and it did get me to wondering if his later exploits did come as the result of a relationship breakup, and him not being able to fully comprehend that nobody is in control. There is no one person that is in control in a relationship. Each party to that relationship can only control themselves. Here again, if the man is presuming to be the one who's in charge, we're linking back to the general, the army general. The difficulty when you have data in your birth certificate feed that links to the military is that every male reference comes with the inference or very strong influence of the man being in charge. Why? Well, because he's in charge of himself in the army. He's then in charge of his unit in the army. He's then in charge of the whole thing. He's a general. It is masculines being in charge. Masculines in charge. This does not apply to relationships because there is no battle. Nobody goes into a relationship as in the same way that they would approach going into battle, except for Andrew Tate. So it's not a healthy or realistic mindset to be sharing with young men in the world, which automatically creates the illusion of them being somehow separate and superior to their female partner who needs to be told what to do so that the man can stay in charge and fulfill his evolutionary function as the protector, the provider, and the warrior when he's living in an apartment in a city. Time and place. These things do not gel together anymore. If they're living on a farm, that argument might stick, but still, on the interpersonal level, when men and women come together, there has to be an understanding that's shared, and it is called mutual respect. And the mutual respect is what starts to break down the military data, the military feed of the male being superior, the male being the warrior, over the woman is what I'm suggesting. He can still be in charge of himself and he can still be able to protect and provide and stand his ground and know what he expects to be treated with respect. But when the respect becomes mutual, he must also respect the female. She can also stand her ground. They can also have those discussions. She can also put her hands up and say, I don't feel that you are respecting me right now. We need to talk about this. And that should not be a problem for a real man. It is a problem, though, for Andrew Tate, who has a very two-dimensional perspective of these things, again, because his data is directly sitting in the United States Department of Defense, where everything is he-man boys in charge. That is the nature of war. So, now that we can see where the social construct of the alpha male is erroneous because of how it links to the military aspect of our world, we start to realize that that military aspect to our world is only relevant for the military and for wars. There are some elements of it that help men and women in a motivational sense. We have motivational speakers all over the world who already talk about ways that anyone can improve their lives, their careers, their ability to endure, face challenges, get back up when you're knocked down, and stay committed to their pursuits and their passions. We already have a lot of motivational speakers. Some of them are famous, some are not. And there's a balance there. What Andrew Tate has done is he's, I think, platformed himself off what is essentially the trans movement, the LGBTQ, and the very small amount of young men there are in the world that have been labelled incels by alpha male bullies. And a lot of the time they become timid because they are bullied by alpha males online. So that's an interesting scenario, which is very similar to something that the Department of Defense also participates in, is problem, reaction, solution. I'm going to cause the problem, I'm going to wait for there to be a reaction, and then I'm going to provide the solution so that I can continue to stay in charge. So if the alpha male bullies the weaker male, he creates the incel, and then he can jump in and sell him his how to get masculine program and provide the solution, and then he's won, and he turns him into the alpha male. I don't see it any other way. I'm very sorry. In regards to the fact that Andrew Tate has obviously been detained for serious charges, including organised crime, sex trafficking, something to do with improper use of a computer, and rape allegations as well. I want to look at the sexual assault allegations because they too directly stem from the military complex. War, this is a whole other discussion, but war and violence are an automatic violation of the feminine in the world. So it doesn't matter if men are fighting. Where men are fighting, they are violating the feminine aspect that resides within them as part of their psyche. They are violating the feminine life that exists in all things. It is there. It is a natural function of energy in our society. There are opposing forces and there are unifying forces. There is masculine energy, there is feminine energy. These things are not just attributed to human beings, but they're present in everything. A flower has both masculine and feminine energy. It has protons, neutrons, electrons, forward spin, backward spin, positive charge, negative charge. All of this stuff is masculine and feminine, interwoven in everything that surrounds us in life. It's charge. It's there. So when we get men fighting, there is a dominance of one charge and the annihilation of another. So that is why war is an automatic violation of the feminine energy that is as much a part of our existence on this planet as masculine energy. And they must be balanced and respected for there to be harmony on Earth. Andrew Tate doesn't understand this. It's very destructive to annihilate the feminine in a man. Andrew Tate doesn't understand this. The alpha male still has feelings. The alpha male still has feminine energy. He may not recognize it as much, but watch how he reacts if his relationship breaks up. Men, no matter whether they're alpha or incel, do tend to react. They take it a lot worse. They take it a lot harder when a relationship breaks up. They're a lot more sensitive than they let on. And that is the passive feminine aspect of a man that is internal, that cannot effectively be controlled or destroyed. Even if that is what somebody like Andrew Tate attempts to do, we have to start looking at the fact that if he doesn't have those functions anymore, that he may be operating in a different capacity to what is genuinely human and humane, and has tipped over into some type of psychopathy because it's imbalanced. He's not scientifically accurate in who he is as a person. So war, being the thing that violates the divine feminine, comes from obviously in this instance we all have our respective defense departments in each country. When it comes to sexual assault, this is the manifestation of war in the bedroom. It's war against a woman, and the various manifestations of sexual assault which sadly include rape and violence and other forms of sexual abuse that women can be subjected to, mostly because he's stronger than her, and if he has messed with her mind enough, he knows how to get her into a position where he can do that. And I'm talking about rape and sexual assault within relationships. Obviously, rape and sexual assault that occurs with strangers or somebody they've only just met, a different type. Environmentally, they're a different type of assault. The one that Andrew Tate has been involved in is the one that has been interpersonal, rape, violence, and sexual assault with some of the girls that he recruited through deception into sex work as webcam girls so that they could make money and he could take his cut for being the brains behind it. So part of that recruitment and part of the arrangement that they had was him maintaining his dominance as an alpha male, and part of that was to dominate them sexually. That's an act of war. The rape and the abuse, I don't really feel like I need to go into the details. It's right there on the internet. Anybody can search for it. There are numerous chunks of evidence, real chunks of evidence that show that is what he has actually engaged in. He was arrested in 2013, 2015 for rape. There was a witness. They had the evidence, but the UK authorities did not want to prosecute because there was a tiny little bit of doubt, even though they had the evidence. So here again, we're living in a society where the rapist is freed if there's a tiny little bit of doubt, but somebody like Julian Assange is detained without charge for 4 years for a whole bunch of things that were actually honourable and noble acts and did not involve violence against women or rape. And no, I'm not going to get into Julian Assange's rape charge, whatever that was, because it was totally blown out of proportion. There were never any charges. It did not happen like that. The authorities turned it into that. Those girls had just wanted an STD test, and it got ugly because he felt that the US feds weren't far behind, so he bolted. It's a completely different thing. He did actually go in for questioning. They did actually post bail, and he did actually spend a week in jail, all for something that somebody had said that may have indicated that he may have engaged in that type of behavior, but it wasn't actually the case. Very, very different to a pimp who engages in sex trafficking, having multiple girlfriends at once, and dominating them through psychological warfare tactics and physical warfare tactics and sexual warfare tactics to generate an income and make himself rich. Kind of makes me angry, gotta tell you. So there again, we can see how it is all this mindset of war. We provide warrior care. War, Fort Meade, Maryland. War, Emery Tate, chess champion, United States Air Force, United States Army. War, Andrew Tate. War, alpha male, Andrew Tate. War. Why? If you look at the technology that is being used in all of this communication, it all comes from the Department of Defense. It is all military technology. It's military technology. Smartphones are military technology. The internet is military technology. Television is military technology. Radio is military technology. Wi-Fi is military technology. These are all our technology comes from the armies, the defense departments, DARPA. That's where it all comes from. Even when the lone guy out there discovers radio wave communication, Marconi, and it can be turned into Morse code. Even though he wasn't part of the Defense Department when he invented these things, what they do is they grab that invention and they use it for themselves, and they turn it into something that can be used in war, and then they sell it as consumer products. So all the technology that somebody like alpha male Andrew Tate is using is also connected to the Department of Defense. So everything about Andrew Tate at this point is violatory of the feminine in this world. I'm not going to get into a religious discussion about Jesus Christ representing the divine feminine. I'm not going to get into a discussion about Andrew Tate choosing to become a Muslim. I'm not going to mention the fact that Prophet Muhammad was a military commander for the last 10 years of his life. I'm not going to mention the fact that it's widely known that at that period of time in Islamic culture, wives were often taken as young as 6 years old, and sexually penetrated as young as 9. I'm just going to mention that all of those things seem to bear heavy relevance to where a guy like Andrew Tate is heading, where he's been, and the message that he has promoted. I will actually talk about a recent interview that he did, I assume at his home, with the BBC interviewer Lucy Williamson, who was sadly subjected to what I perceive to be an extremely hostile, aggressive, militarised Andrew Tate. And when we have a militarised alpha male in the room talking to a woman who was asking questions that he clearly wasn't happy to answer, what we ended up with was a domestic assault. The way that he spoke to her was abusive. The way that he treated her was disrespectful. The way that he interrupted and dominated and tried to repel every line of inquiry that she opened is perfectly the exact example. It's an example of everything that I have just said to you right up until this point. That is the end result, where a woman whose job is to ask those questions, a woman who is obligated to ask those questions in a certain way that alludes to a sense of awareness in herself of the question that she is asking, the seriousness of the charges that he faces. She's not going to sit there and be friendly. And he wanted a friendly conversation with a woman who knows why he was detained. Again, this is not real world stuff. This is an alpha male being delusional in what he expects from a woman in his home. Complete obedience to what he wants in his home. That is not how interpersonal relationships work. That is not how mutual respect is fostered. That is not professional either. So when a woman comes to his home as an interviewer and asks him questions that are very serious about his predicament, his treatment of women, and she's asking these questions in the hope that he will answer them, which is generally what an interview is, and she is met with a wall of gaslighting, shaming, steam train deflections, interruptions, his voice raised for most of the interview, talking over her and also pointing at her, filling her with abuse. It was abusive. It was simply abusive. If somebody spoke to me the way that Andrew Tate speaks to women or even to men, Andrew Tate would not receive any of my attention. I would just be like, oh, okay, well, I can see we're not on the same page. I'm over here with mutual respect, chilling the fuck out. And actually stepping back and allowing a space for two people to really hear each other, not just project one way at whoever is in the room that one person doesn't want to talk to or answer. That's not how it works. We've seen the infantile mindset that the alpha male culture is putting forward. Andrew Alpha Tate, and his brother Tristan are obviously the representatives of this alpha male mindset, and we can see now that it's predominantly delusional because it doesn't exist in the real world. They are calling it the real world, but that it is not. That's not the real world. That is only the real world if you are in war or you are in a profession which requires you to be a warrior. I don't see these Tates hunting, gathering food, donning armour and having to go into the gladiator pit and fend off giants with swords or lions, tigers and bears. This is not the Revenant. As high-flying business jocks, if they want to drive around in fancy cars and smoke stogies, I prefer it being done by Arnold Schwarzenegger somehow. I don't know, just me. Personal preference. I'm not so keen on seeing it being done by guys who have no respect for women, and believe that the destruction of the feminine in the world is the only way that they can survive, or that the feminine in the world is its only role is one of service to men. It's clearly not true. Relationships are equal, fair and balanced if they are healthy at all, and if they are not, they're not healthy. This man finds himself in trouble. This man's getting pounded on the internet. The evidence is washing up all over the place. I'm going to take you very quickly to something on his website that is now in the web archive. It's his PhD program, and I just want to read to you one thing in particular where he says my job was to get women to fall in love with me. He says, literally, that was my job. My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test if she's quality. I'm not sure what that means. Get her to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I say. Where does this come from? Boot camp. Do anything I say is boot camp. It is originally a militarized mindset. Somebody's out front, somebody's in charge, and everybody else is following orders. Yeah? And then he says, and then get her on webcam so we could become rich together. Whether you agree or disagree with what I did with their loyalty, submission, and love for me doesn't matter. This is what he said. You cannot reject the results, and the results are simple. My girlfriends would do more for me than 99.9% of men's wives would do for them. Do you hear what he just said? My recruits would follow my orders 99.9% more than the wives of other men. My army recruits, my soldiers, I am the commander. I am the general. That is where this mindset comes from. In terms of sex trafficking, that's an open confession to the fact that he trafficked, because he deceived them and coerced them and didn't tell them about the webcam stuff until after he'd had sex with them, at which point they are already semi-brainwashed into believing this guy, and it's that much easier for him at that point to get them to do what they otherwise would not want to do if it was the first question he asked them. Had he started his own webcam business and advertised as a guy who could provide a service that made it easier for women to get work, and they approached him as sex workers knowingly and signed contracts stating that they were knowingly engaging in it, he could not be charged with recruitment or sex trafficking, but he chose the recruitment method, the brainwashing method, the coercion method, the lying method, the fraud method to then sexually exploit girls, women, who had no intention of entering this adult sex industry before they met him. They had no intention. Even when they slept with him, they had no intention of entering that industry. It was only after they slept with him that he seduced them into going into that industry. And it is remarkable to me that the Romanian authorities have let him and Tristan out under house arrest. It is remarkable to me that they do not have a solid prosecution. It is remarkable to me that in 2013, 2015, there was ample opportunity to have him booked for rape and the UK authorities dropped it. It is remarkable to me that this continues in a society that runs on military technology. The woman is no longer important. The woman is just a noisy feminist. The woman is the one who's unhinged, despite the fact that every time the alpha male opens his mouth, all we hear is hysterics. Despite the fact that every time the alpha male opens his mouth, all we hear is laborious, infantile blabber. We live in a world that is run by military technology, constantly denigrating the feminine in this world. That is why there has been a women's rights movement. That is why it persists. And the military mindset applied to women, where porn also is an act of war. These things have been spread more widely and virally. The sex assaults, the sex industry, only lonely fans, the normalization of porn, our youth being swept up into the sex industry. These things only exist and flourish because of the technology that's being used. The United States Department of Defense, the internet, the guys who invented it, and the people who were male, who were stupid enough to allow it to be released to the public without thinking ahead, without seeing what the potential problems could be. Why did they do that? Because that is the battle stance. The battle stance doesn't consider the consequences. It only sees what's right in front of it. There's either an enemy standing right in front of it or there isn't. They didn't see one, so they forged ahead. That's a military mindset applied to male thinking that is the reason for why there are so many problems on this planet. That's why. Every problem in this world today was caused by men who did not think ahead. Why? Because they're still on the battlefield. They're not tacticians. They're not tacticians. They have an idea, they want to run with it. Andrew Tate had an idea, he wanted to run with it. He didn't see ahead, he didn't look ahead, he didn't check the laws, he didn't do his homework. He thought what he was doing was perfectly legal. He thought it was just a moral issue. Why? Well, because he's not smart. Being an alpha male doesn't automatically make you smart either. In most cases, it does tend to give the impression that one might be actually dumb. King Kong is a gorilla. King Kong had a little tiny female human end up in the forest with him, in the jungle. King Kong liked the idea of beauty. King Kong carried her around and protected her with his life. King Kong climbed the Eiffel Tower, got shot at by airplanes, and still wouldn't let her go. But King Kong never once considered her needs. He didn't care what she thought. He didn't care what she felt. He didn't care whether she wanted to be with King Kong or not. That's the alpha male mindset. It doesn't care about anything else but itself. So it has to go. It's an evolutionary failure. If Andrew Tate wants to be the ultimate representation of military technology, the United States Department of Defense, sex as violence, porn as an act of war, and man as an ape, that's obviously his choice. But he's going to go to prison and he can explain himself to Big Bob in the fucking showers. Because there are bigger men in this world than Andrew Tate. There are much bigger men. And there are much bigger women. There are much more powerful people in the world than Andrew Tate. Whatever he's talking about with thinks he's being attacked by the goddamn Matrix. I have no idea what he means. The Matrix is a media matrix and it's sustained by technology. So he thinks he's being attacked by technology or attacked by politicians or attacked by the media, the news media. Well, no, they're noticing how fucked up he is and they're saying something about it. The alpha male suddenly becomes frightened because he doesn't understand why anyone would attack him. He's supposed to be in charge. He's in charge, isn't he? That's not part of the script. Everyone else in the world's not playing their role that he has scripted for them. They're breaking script, and he interprets it as an attack from the Matrix. Andrew, how does one get attacked by the Matrix? How are you being attacked? It's called public comment. And you may not have allowed your women to have a comment. You may not have allowed them to have an opinion, but other people do. It must be inconvenient to feel attacked. But it's also interesting that you take the approach of attack in your business models. It's kind of as simple as you get what you give. There are spiritual principles, not just philosophies and not just, martial arts philosophies and stuff that apply to life. There are subtler qualities that go into how we relate with the world that at some point have to culminate in maturity. And if maturity is lacking, the world will let you know. People will be angry. You will feel attacked. And I'm going to tell you, you're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to complain. You will do what I say. Who's the last person to tell you what to do? Right? So there we have it. The simulation has a matrix within it. That matrix is internal. I've talked about it in other podcasts. I've talked about the coding. I've talked about who's behind it. I'm not going to freely give that information to Andrew Tate. God knows he will latch onto anything to bolster his public image and hide the crimes that he has committed, which is also the very nature of war. is that exact thing. Who can play the game the best? Yeah? As far as chess goes, I'm not seeing where the chess is in an alpha male's argument. It's too two-dimensional. It's a strategy for a game, but it's not a strategy for personal relationships. It's a strategy for a battlefield, but it's not a strategy for how we relate to each other and how we find our place in the world. It's a strategy, but it's not a solution to problems. Thanks very much for joining me. I will quickly just check if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. Just let me flick over to my other stuff here. Oh dear. Yeah, look, there's a video here of I read those quotes out to you at the start. Things that Andrew Tate has said on video as part of his PhD program. I have a release here from the Bucharest Court of Appeals as to why they've released him. Really lame stuff that it's not even worth going into. It's bilious and it's incorrect. From them, I'm disappointed. There's a publication here from Vice about stuff that he did in 2013 and 15 where he said that he enjoyed raping this one girl. And there is also his website, which is on the web archive, cobratate.com, which you can find to see for yourself under the PhD program. And if you follow him on Twitter, he's already got multiple accounts promoting his real world, which is the delusional world, and the war room, which has and should have nothing to do with women. And his business models, which only apply to a very small percent of the population and not suitable for young boys who haven't fully developed yet or know who they are. Everything that he has to offer in terms of business is for adults. And personally, he should be kept separate from networks where children are. The exponential damage, the organised crime, and the encouraging other people to engage in unlawful activity, often boys as young as 14, 15, 16, is a real problem. It's a problem in my country. This alpha male mindset and disgusting disrespect of women has spread from America to other parts of the world. Unfortunately, it is part of some religious cultures in the world, and we all have to be discerning and try and protect our children and the people we love from clearly outdated, inhumane methods of approaching problems in our societies. Solutions are found at a much subtler level. They require an element of grace, femininity, understanding, compassion. People like myself will actually get up and fight fire with fire, and still retain all of the qualities in a human being that are supposed to be there, to the best of our ability. That's pretty much all I have to say for the moment. And yeah, that's it for now. I hope I filled in some gaps there. Interesting though, if you want to check your birth certificates and where you were born, have a look at some of the things that were happening in the hospitals at the time that you were born in the area, and you might get a little bit of a better understanding about some of the things that have shaped who you are, directly related to your birth certificates, the numbers on your birth certificates, the barcodes on your birth certificates, right down to the street names and the phone numbers. All the data that's there goes into shaping who we eventually become. A sad, unfortunate fact about being born into a military simulation. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.